Pokemon creepypastas have been something that has followed this series since inception. When I first got into this series, I remember trying to find ways to get that rare Mew underneath the truck, but what I discovered was way darker. From Ash's Coma to Rotted Yellow, today we are going over the major creepypastas of Pokemon. I found this list from Reddit and I will post a link to it in the description if you need more information. For those who aren't aware, the iceberg starts at the top with the most well-known stories, and then near the bottom it starts getting more obscure and a lot darker. Starting off, we have Pokemon Lost Silver. It is written by an anonymous author. We follow somebody buying a used discounted version of Silver. As most of us would, they would take a peek at the save file. All 251 Pokemon were caught, and the game was completed. All seemed normal up until the point of checking out the player's party. There were 5 unknown Pokemon who were just letters. They spelled out leave, with the other member being a Cynical named Hurry. So hurry, leave. After closing out the screen, the player is stuck in a dark version of Bellsprout Tower. Flash is quickly used to illuminate the room, and from here there are a few Pokemon battles. Cynical fights and is killed instead of fainting. There is also a battle between a Celebi and a Pikachu. They also end up killing each other. It all concludes with the trainer becoming a ghost and dying to be forgotten. The story became insanely popular on YouTube and spawned a lot of fan art depicting the trainer's death. Besides that, the game got so popular that someone made a ROM hack that actually plays it all out. The game also got an extra part added to it called Lost Silver Hidden. Hidden was supposedly written by the original author, but there is no confirmation. As I said, they are anonymous. Next up is Pokemon Creepy Black. It was another story written by an anonymous author. Similar to Lost Silver, we follow somebody buying a copy of a used Pokemon game. Instead of silver though, it is this black cartridge that was shown on the screen. In this game, there is a mysterious ghost Pokemon that can kill other Pokemon in the player's party. It uses a move called Curse that makes the opposing Pokemon disappear. Throughout the story, we see a pretty normal Pokemon Kanto playthrough with a little murder sprinkled on top. It reaches its climax after completing the Elite Four, where we see the player as an old man. It goes to a fight screen and it is a battle against the ghosts. It is an unwinnable battle, resulting in the screen turning black and the save file being deleted. After reaching thousands of people, this game also got a ROM hack where you could play out the story. I mean, in the real Pokemon world, they probably are killing each other for food anyways. This game is more of a realistic take with some edginess on top. Easter Egg, Snow on Mount Silver. This story follows 2 siblings, a brother and a sister. They both got copies of Pokemon Silver and start playing through them. The brother starts using some Game Shark codes and hacking his game. The sister was opposed to this idea and kept her game legit. After a few weeks of play, the sister heard her brother yelling. She found him pale and started with a broken Game Boy in front of him. It resulted in him being sent to a psychiatric unit and staying for a few days. The sister disposed of the game and forgot about it for years. One day she was cleaning up and the game reappeared. The tragedy no longer being fresh, the curiosity got to her and she slotted it into her Game Boy. Quickly she stumbled upon Mount Silver, but something was very different. The Pokemon she fights are mutilated and terrifying. Instead of fainting, the Pokemon are dying. Upon reaching the top, she fights Red, who follows the trend of having tormented Pokemon. After a long struggle, the cut-up Pikachu uses Pain Split and kills both himself and the girl's Pokemon simultaneously. Red says, "It's over," and the game starts emitting horrifying sounds and the screen starts flashing. She throws the Game Boy on the ground and destroys it. This story was pretty disturbing when I was younger. Seeing all the sprites and whatnot actually had me thinking at night when I first heard this one. Like the previous entries, this game got a ROM hack and also received a video on YouTube depicting the events. Lavender Town Syndrome. I feel like this is one of the most popular theories among all Pokemon creepypastas. Lavender Town Syndrome talks about the music that plays in the original Pokemon game when one goes to Lavender Town. It was said that the frequency in the song was leading to kids getting depressed and then ending themselves. It does seem like all of this is capped though, and there is no evidence showing that anybody was dead from Lavender Town Syndrome. This one did hit hard before fact checking was easy. People were scared to listen to the track in case the scary sound would make you the next victim. The Lavender Town theory had a lasting impact, and because of that, a lot of the theories based themselves upon it. Buried Alive Model. This refers to this little guy, the cryptid hand that was called Buried Alive. This took place in Lavender Town at Pokemon Tower. Instead of the normal Marowak that is now encountered, it was rumored that Buried Alive was the actual final boss, and that it was still in the files. After the battle ended, you would see the full model of Buried Alive being a human corpse. It says, "You're here. I'm trapped. And I'm lonely. So very lonely. Won't you join me?" Ending with a game over screen, this boss then takes over the Game Boy startup sound and replaces it with static. At the time, this was supposed to be less of a creepypasta but more of a rumor. People genuinely believed that this was in the files, and it was similar to the Mew being underneath the truck rumor. The fake videos back in the day really added to its legitimacy and fooled many. It was pretty obviously fake if you thought about it for a little though. Having a boss that was not beatable ending like that for a kid's game would have never passed. Ash's coma. Another famous theory which has an iconic image attached with it. In short, you know how Ash is 10 years old forever in the show? It's because after the incident with Spearow on the bike, he actually went into a coma. It explains why the world works how it does, such as a free Pokemon Center and a socialized government. It also reasons how a child could go out and battle with dangerous monsters. And all the characters have a deeper meaning to them, all making up who Ash really is. Like Brock is a representation of his sexuality. As Ash was a virgin when he died, Brock is extremely sexual throughout the story. This story was the first coma story I ever heard, and I believe it was the biggest one, definitely for the time it was created. It led to an offspring for every TV series getting a coma theory, and that has continued to this day. Honestly, I think that every show has a dream or coma theory and people can make a sense in every way. Hypno's Lullaby. This follows the story of Preston in middle school. He's a kid that is getting bullied for being a Pokemon freak. He's extremely passionate about it, but it leads to him being isolated and harassed. This all culminates in him being on the playground one day and he sees something cool in the woods. He has a Hypno swinging his pendulum, promising some fun and friendship if they hang out. Preston follows and Hypno brings him to a cave. Waiting for the fun to start, Preston looks around the cave where he makes an unsettling discovery. He finds the clothes and remains of many other children in the cave. This leads him to figure out what was going on. He begs Hypno to let him go, but Hypno just taunts him and the story ends on a cliffhanger. This story led to a lot of tales involving Hypno, and it even led to a Pokedex entry saying that it once took a child that it hypnotized. Dude is one creepy looking Pokemon compared to a lot of them, and this story had me scared of people with pendulums for life. Pokemon Strangled Red. Going down a tier, we get another bootleg version of Pokemon Red. It was a hacked version that did not allow the owner to continue the old save. Being forced to make a new save, it is quickly seen that this was a hacked version of the game, and it was very different. Taking place a year before the real games, it has new characters and dynamics. The main trainer, Steven, carries a Charmander who is stronger than a regular one. There is a sort of reputation system in the game where people recognize the trainer and his Pokemon. Throughout the game, it's shown that the now Charizard was extremely strong, and the trainer and Pokemon have a great bond. After defeating the champion and only missing one Pokemon to complete the dex, Steven must do a quick trade, his Charizard for the rival starter. During the trade, the game crashes and you hear a loud snap. After restarting the game, it starts a year later displaying the gravesite of your once beloved Charizard. Honestly, this one is just more sad than scary. You build a bond with a Pokemon only for it to be taken away from you at the end. Come Follow Me. This is a spin to the previously mentioned Lavender Town syndrome. It uses the basic premise of kids killing themselves from the music, but this time we are in the real world with detectives trying to figure out what happened. After years of digging, they find some of the programmers involved with making it. This leads to an arrest of the people, but not the end of the tragedy. As the games were still released, it didn't seem like much help. Years later, still suffering, the detective plays one of the copies of the game. He starts seeing deceased children all over his room and he starts having a panic attack, begging for them to come back. In complete delusion, he starts seeing the programmer and he nudges him to end his life to stop the suffering. The detective obliges, and it is rumored that these game cartridges are still out in the wild today. This story shows the inspiration from Lavender Town syndrome and builds a really interesting story in itself. I remember this one being unique and getting me good. Definitely recommend you all to read it in its entirety. I Am Not a Clone. Going down another level, we get our first Mewtwo story. It follows a trainer and his Mewtwo as they try to capture a Vulpix in a beaten up mansion. During their trip there, they start discovering journals all throughout explaining the origins of Mewtwo. It goes into detail saying that he is just a clone of Mew. This sends Mewtwo spiraling and eternally debating whether he is himself or just a fragment of something else. An existential crisis of the Pokemon is really felt throughout, and it is a story beat that is still used today. This is one of my favorite stories, and it is not really scary but more of a psychological kicker. If you were a clone and found out years later in the future, I think it would lead to similar reactions to Mewtwo. Tarnished Gold is, well, a tarnished version of Pokemon Gold. Our protagonist finds a copy of the game with a large X on it instead of the normal Ho-Oh. Just happy to have another copy, they begin to play, but quickly discover the game is a lot different. It focuses on the rival for the main character and all the text is changed. From the onset, it is said that Pokemon are tools and disposable, followed up with all the NPCs having cryptic messages as their dialogue. After finishing a few towns in this disturbed state, the trainer ends up in Vermilion City. Music stops completely, and the trainer witnesses a bunch of disturbing images of Pokemon and sprites of headless NPCs. This all leads to the trainer finding Giovanni with a Mewtwo where he kills everybody around you, leading to an ultimate battle with just him. Helpless, the trainer loses and is murdered with the end screen appearing. Another ROM hack type of game, this one was pretty gruesome compared to the other ones. Showing headless NPCs was pretty extreme, and I am glad I did not read this one when I was younger. Curse of the Unknown King leads off the next level. Finally getting to some obscure pastas, this one begins during Christmas Eve. Hearing a knock on the door, the protagonist peeks out the door and sees a note with a game. It was a copy of Pokemon Silver with instructions on how to finish the game and capture rare legendaries, with step-by-step instructions. Having the name of Suseg, a reverse of Jesus, they followed instructions. Exactly 3 AM, the trainer had to be at the Alpha ruins as it triggered a sequence unleashing the Unknown King. After it entered the game, all the NPCs and Pokemon were eradicated from the game, leaving it lifeless. The trainer then receives a call from his mother in-game and tells him to meet up at Professor Oak's. Here they encounter the Unknown King and commence in battle. After they lost over and over again, the Unknown King says that they failed and humanity was doomed. After resetting the game, the save file disappeared and the protag remembered something. At 3 AM, it was exactly 666 hours of playtime, and with the name of Reverse Jesus, it led to very unsettling thoughts. This is the first story to go a bit into religion and the fear that can cause. The Unknown King is a pretty cool character, but come on, who is leaving a free copy of Pokemon Silver at somebody's door? That game is pretty dang expensive. Nurse Joy. This is the first one involving the iconic healer. This story follows a trainer who is trying to get his Pokemon healed. Throughout the story, the character is wondering how there are so many different Nurse Joys who all look and act the same. By the end of the night at one of the Pokemon centers, the Nurse Joy doses the trainer with a sleep powder injection. Here they are sent to a surgical room, and in this room the nurse dissects the trainer, taking out many organs including his dick. From there they inject him with Joy Serum, and by the morning the trainer wakes up wanting to work in a Pokemon center and a lust for fresh Pokemon trainers. For our first Nurse Joy story, this was pretty solid. Instead of going for the usual Pokemon death story, it goes after the trainer, and it answers the long-ass question of, how are there so many Nurse Joys? Vermilion City Construction Project. This also takes place mainly in Lavender Town. In the games you see an old man with a Machop which shakes the ground when you interact with it, but it doesn't really do anything. The story set in the past for that old man, Mr. Fuji, is the mayor of Lavender Town. It was a struggling city, and Giovanni proposed that they replace the Pokemon Tower with a radio tower. The catch was that to fund it they must hunt Cubones and sell their skulls. Over time, tragic accidents kept occurring, such as mysterious deaths and other unexplainable issues. This caused Giovanni to become paranoid and scared of the spirits. After losing to Red in the game, it is said that he disappeared forever, but that the site is still haunted by those Cubones. Maybe that is why Marowak is protecting the tower. It is also said that the Mr. Fuji that we see is an apparition, and that explains why interaction with him in the game leads to nothing. Building up on that Lavender Town fear, the story takes another spin entirely, explaining a completely different part of the Pokemon game in a frightening state. Jessica. This follows a person who loved Pokemon games growing up. Starting with Pokemon Yellow, they named their first Pikachu Jessica. From there on out, they would trade Jessica to all of their Pokemon games, so it would be their faithful companion. After years of this, the cartridge containing Jessica got destroyed, leading to the end of their beloved partner. Playing Pokemon games in the future to try and fill the hole, the games led to many strange occurrences. They were all linked back to Jessica. It culminated to an emotional encounter in Pokemon Black. Here the person sees Jessica's spirit and apologizes for their mistakes of destroying the game. The story ends with Jessica being reborn as a smiling Raichu holding a copy of the damaged yellow cartridge. This was not really a scary story, but another sad one. It does lead to questions about virtual connections and nostalgia that we all had as kids. It also reminded me of when my younger brother deleted my older brother's save file. I know that had to hurt losing all that hard work and connections you built along the way. Being a more grounded story, it hits pretty hard. Pokemon Dead Channel. This is the first of the 5th level. If you knew the ones before, I think I'm going to start losing some of you now. The story followed a boy who was a bit of a loner. With a very little social interaction, he is gifted a GameCube with a bunch of games like Legend of Zelda, Mario, and the Pokémon channel. Without anything else to do, he grows a bond with his Pikachu in the Pokémon channel. The Pikachu acts human-like because it behaves just like one. Through the years, they build an extremely strong bond until the kid goes to a new school and starts building connections. From here, the friends he makes end up succumbing to some distressing events. By the end of his first year, he is alone once again, and in this period, he goes back to the GameCube. Turning on the Pokémon channel again for the first time in years, he sees his Pikachu, but things seem a bit different. The Pikachu acts resentful, and it starts orchestrating some horrifying scenes, such as them playing tic-tac-toe with Magikarp's bloody body parts. He also sees messages written in blood on the walls and the ruins of truth. This displays the Pikachu's full despair and loneliness, similar to what the kid was feeling before. After leaving it for years, the Pikachu became what he could have become. This is a pretty creepy story and it's pretty similar to the last one, but this is something you had a connection with disturbing you and getting back at you with no forgiveness being given. Blue Tears is another ROM hack game. This time it was bought from a garage sale with just the word Tears on top of the Pokemon Blue cartridge. From here, the player explores the save file that was started. It starts off differently with the trainer being blue and him only having a Pidgeot with the item Knife. Off the rip, the character is at Mount Silver and is going up to battle his rival Red. Once the battle commences, the only option is Murder. After clicking it, the battle ends and it depicts Red dying. Afterwards, the trainer is left with only one option of their own: Suicide. After clicking that button, the game turns off and says that it is not over, and I will be watching the player and to be careful. This gains even more trust when he sees the news story about the man selling the games at the garage sale. He committed suicide after murdering somebody with a knife. The story is pretty extreme and it leads into the real world, which adds another layer of fear to it. I never heard of this story until this video, so it was a pretty good read I recommend. Glitchy Red is similar to the previous game, but now it is a hacked Pokemon Red game. In this game, there are a lot of graphical distortions and odd text changes. The trainer was named Red, and throughout he is questioning his existence and the nature of his reality. As the game progresses, Red starts trying to manipulate the player, preventing them from progressing. It is implied that Red is trapped within the game. As this goes on, the glitches start to escalate and Red's dialogue becomes more desperate. It ends with the game turning off and erasing all progress and Red saying a sorry goodbye. I do remember this one, and it always disturbed me a bit when I would play Silver or Gold while seeing Red at Mount Silver. Like a lot of the other games, it does have a ROM hack and all of that. Glitchlet is a reference to a story about Pokemon glitches. It reminisces on some of the old glitches such as catching Mew, Missino, and Glitch City. It then recalls using an unnoted glitch which caused a glitch Diglett or a glitchlet. The Pokemon could use Dig, but every time it did, it inflicted some damage to itself. Over the course of a long training session, the narrator talks about how it seems like it was getting damaged while it was underground. After playing through the game a bit longer, the trainer finds himself in a glitched out version of Diglett's cave. Here, Glitchlet was the only Pokemon left in their party. Quickly, a fight began against a deformed version of Dugtrio. Glitchlet's move changed from Dig to simply display No Hope. The battle resulted in Dugtrio killing Glitchlet and the game resetting. Honestly, this was not too great of a story, and I think this is why it was so obscure. A Diglett story is unique, but the story itself wasn't too crazy, and I think is a little bit hyped. Ruins of Alpha refers to a story that uses some of the Lavender Syndrome story. In this story, we follow 3 young men who were very interested in the Lavender Town music. So interested in it that they create algorithms or programs to paint photos of the tracks and rebuild the songs to their original state. Due to the limitations of the Game Boy, something had to be cut out. But these guys were not standing with that. While creating these programs, they find some pretty scary photos, but they find something even more sinister. The track from Ruins of Alph playing overlapping Lavender.wav was even worse than the stories of just Lavender. After discovering this, 2 of the 3 boys give it a listen, and over time they are found dead, with no evidence explaining how. The narrator never gave the overlapping track a listen and wrote this story to inform us all to avoid it. This is a good add-on to the Lavender Town story, just adding more layers to it. The story now feels a bit more fleshed out if we combine these 2 stories into one. This is the first time I heard about this one, but it did seem pretty popular and has some content made on it during its heyday. These Pokemon creepypastas were terrifying, nostalgic, and a great trip. In this part, we went through 5 levels and 20 pastas. There are still 3 levels to go, but 22 pastas left. I'm sorry I have to split it up, but I'm just a college kid and I'm working full time doing these videos every free second I can. I'll definitely have part 2 of this out within a week and hopefully sooner if y'all enjoy it. The bell is the best way to keep updated, but a sub works too. Thanks for watching, and adios.